The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon as Hannah Odell gripped the reins of her exhausted mare, the distant lights of Kearney, Nebraska finally appearing after days of hard travel. The year was 1878, and she had nothing left but the clothes on her back, a small bundle of possessions and memories she wished she could forget. The small frontier town came into sharper focus as Hannah approached a single main street lined with wooden structures, a general store, saloon, and scattered houses that marked civilization after the endless prairie. Her shoulders ached from tension, her heart heavy with distrust. She'd learned the hard way that a woman alone was seen as easy prey in these untamed territories. "Easy there," she murmured to her horse as the animal sensed her anxiety. The mare's coat was slick with sweat after their long journey from Omaha. Hannah had fled without looking back, determined to outrun both her past and the man who had taken everything from her. As she rode down the main street, Hannah felt eyes tracking her progress. A lone woman arriving at dusk was bound to attract attention. She kept her chin high despite her exhaustion. The Carson Hotel stood at the far end of the street, a two-story wooden building with a small porch and a hand-painted sign swinging gently in the evening breeze. Hannah dismounted with stiff limbs and tied her horse to the hitching post. She'd need to find a stable, but first she required a room for the night. Her funds were limited, another painful reminder of how thoroughly Edward had deceived her. The hotel lobby was simple but clean, with worn floorboards that creaked beneath her boots. A middle-aged woman with streaks of gray in her pinned-up hair looked up from behind a small desk. "Evening, miss. Looking for a room?" Hannah nodded. "Yes, madam, just for tonight, possibly longer." The woman assessed her with kind but curious eyes. 75 cents a night, includes breakfast. I'm Martha Carson." "Hannah Odell," she replied, counting out the coins from her dwindling supply. "I was wondering if you might know of any work in town. I'm handy with a needle and can keep books." Martha's eyebrows rose slightly. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Abernathy at the general store mentioned needing help. Her eyes aren't what they used to be for the ledgers. She handed Hannah a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs. There's a washroom at the end of the hall." "Thank you," Hannah said, relief washing through her. Finding work quickly was essential. After settling her horse at the livery stable, another expense, she could barely afford. Hannah returned to her room. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. She sat heavily on the edge of the mattress, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the bone-deep weariness. 6 months ago, she'd believed Edward Blackwell's promises of love and partnership. The charming businessman had swept into her life in Omaha, offering courtship and eventually a business proposition. Hannah had invested her modest inheritance in what he claimed was a flourishing trading company, only to discover it was all fabricated. The morning she'd planned to confront him, he had disappeared along with her money and those of several other unsuspecting victims. Hannah buried her face in her hands. How could she have been so foolish, so trusting? Never again, she vowed. In Kearney, she would rely on no one but herself. Morning brought pale sunlight through the thin curtains. Hannah dressed in her second-best dress, a navy blue cotton with minimal adornments, and pinned her chestnut hair into a simple but respectable style. Appearances mattered when seeking employment. After a quick breakfast of biscuits and coffee, she made her way to Abernathy's general store. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and Hannah was immediately struck by the organized chaos of the establishment. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with everything from dry goods to tools, fabric to medicines. A white-haired woman looked up from where she was struggling with a ledger book, spectacles perched on the end of her nose. "Good morning. Something I can help you find, Mrs. Abernathy?" "I'm Hannah Odell. Mrs. Carson mentioned you might be in need of assistance with your books." The older woman's face brightened. "Indeed I am. These numbers swim before my eyes these days." She gestured for Hannah to approach. "You have experience with bookkeeping?" "Yes, madam. I managed accounts for my father's furniture shop in St. Louis before." Hannah hesitated. "Before coming west?" Mrs. Abernathy studied her face. "Well, let's see what you can do. Take a look at this month's entries and tell me if they balance proper." Hannah spent the next hour demonstrating her skills, discovering several small errors in the ledgers that explained why the monthly totals hadn't been matching the cash box. Mrs. Abernathy watched with growing satisfaction. "You've got a good head for numbers, Miss Odell. I can offer $4 a week with Sundays off. Would that suit?" It was less than Hannah had earned in Omaha, but it would cover her room and meals with a little left over. "That would be fine, thank you." "Excellent. You can start tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp." As Hannah left the store, a sense of accomplishment warmed her chest. She had secured lodging and employment within a day of arriving. Perhaps Kearney would be the fresh start she needed. Her moment of satisfaction was short-lived as she stepped off the boardwalk and directly into the path of an oncoming horse. She stumbled backward with a startled cry, barely regaining her balance before falling. "Whoa." A deep voice commanded, and the magnificent chestnut stallion halted inches from her. "My apologies, madam. Didn't see you step out." Hannah's heart thundered in her chest as she looked up at the rider. He sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered in a dust-covered denim jacket. His face was partially shadowed by a well-worn cowboy hat, but she could make out a strong jaw darkened with stubble and eyes that crinkled with concern. "No harm done," she managed, stepping back onto the boardwalk. The man tipped his hat. "Name's Wyatt Young, madam. Haven't seen you in Kearney before." "I arrived yesterday," Hannah replied stiffly, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "Hannah Odell. Welcome to our little town, Miss Odell." His smile was warm, but Hannah had learned that charm often concealed deception. "If you're new to town, I'd be happy to thank you, but I've managed quite well on my own," she interrupted, her tone cooler than she'd intended. Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps surprise at her abruptness, before he nodded. "Of course. Good day to you, then." As he rode away, Hannah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Men like Wyatt Young, with their easy smiles and confident demeanor, were precisely the kind she needed to avoid. Experience had taught her that a handsome face often hid the most dangerous deceptions. The next few weeks passed in a steady rhythm as Hannah settled into life in Kearney. Her work at the general store proved satisfying. Mrs. Abernathy was fair and appreciated Hannah's meticulous attention to detail. The older woman had a kind heart but a shrewd business mind, and Hannah found herself learning more about running a successful frontier business. "You've got a natural talent for this, Mrs. Abernathy commented one afternoon as Hannah reorganized the fabric section, creating an appealing display that had already caught the eye of several female customers. "Sales have increased since you started." Hannah smiled, pleased by the compliment. "I enjoy the work." It was true the routine and responsibility provided structure that helped keep her darker thoughts at bay. She had gradually met more of Kearney's residents. Martha Carson had introduced her to the town's small social circle, including the minister's wife and the schoolteacher. They were welcoming enough, though Hannah maintained a polite distance, unwilling to form close attachments. It was impossible, however, to avoid occasional encounters with Wyatt Young. Kearney was too small for their paths not to cross, and she learned through town gossip that he owned one of the larger cattle ranches outside of town, the Double Y Ranch, some 10 miles to the northwest. He employed several hands and was, by all accounts, a fair and respected employer. Each time they met, he was unfailingly courteous, tipping his hat and greeting her with that same warm smile. Hannah responded with cool politeness, determined to maintain her emotional walls. Yet she couldn't help noticing things about him, how he always helped Mrs. Jenkins carry her purchases to her wagon, or the patient way he listened to old Mr. Thompson's rambling stories of the war. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Hannah was closing the store when the bell jangled. She looked up, ready to inform the customer they were closing, only to see Wyatt Young shaking rainwater from his hat. "Apologies for coming in so late," he said. "My ranch hand broke his only pair of work gloves, and we've got fence mending tomorrow." "We were just closing, but I can help you quickly," Hannah replied, gesturing toward the rear of the store where work supplies were kept. Wyatt followed her to the appropriate shelf. "Haven't seen much of you around town gatherings. The harvest dance is coming up next weekend." Hannah selected a sturdy pair of leather gloves. I've been busy with the store. Mrs. Abernathy has been teaching me about inventory management. She named the price, deliberately keeping the conversation professional. Wyatt placed coins on the counter, studying her with those observant eyes. You've made quite an impression on folks here. Mrs. Abernathy says you're the best help she's ever had. That's kind of her to say. Hannah wrapped the gloves in brown paper. You know, Miss Odell, people generally come to places like Kearney for a reason. His voice was gentle, not prying. Some are running toward something, others are running away. Hannah stiffened. I don't see how that's any of your concern, Mr. Young. It's not, he agreed easily. Except that folks here look out for each other. If you ever need help with anything at all, you just need to ask. The sincerity in his voice was almost enough to crack her resolve. Almost, thank you, but I'm quite capable of managing my own affairs. Wyatt accepted the package with a nod. I've no doubt about that. Still, the offer stands. He moved toward the door, then paused. About that harvest dance, would you consider attending? The whole town will be there. Good food, music, might be a nice change from ledger books. Hannah hesitated. Part of her apart she tried to ignore was tempted. It had been months since she'd allowed herself any real enjoyment. I'll consider it, she said finally. His smile brightened his entire face. That's all I ask. Good evening, Miss Odell. After he left, Hannah leaned against the counter, troubled by her conflicted feelings. Wyatt Young seemed genuinely good-natured, but so had Edward in the beginning. Charm could mask the most calculating hearts, and yet she couldn't deny a small, treacherous spark of interest whenever their paths crossed. The following Saturday evening found Hannah standing outside the town hall, where lanterns illuminated farmers and townspeople arriving for the harvest dance. After much internal debate, she decided to attend, telling herself it was simply to integrate better into the community where she now lived. She wore her best dress, a deep green cotton with a modest bustle and lace at the collar. Her hair was arranged in a more elaborate style than her usual workday simplicity. Standing at the edge of the gathering, Hannah felt suddenly uncertain. Perhaps this had been a mistake. You came. Wyatt's voice behind her made her turn. He looked different out of his work clothes, still rugged, but his clean shirt and vest gave him a more polished appearance. I'm glad. Hannah managed a small smile. I thought it might be nice to see more of the town. May I escort you inside? He offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand lightly on his sleeve. Thank you. The town hall had been transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn stalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorned the walls. A small band played lively tunes, and couples already filled the dance floor. Tables laden with food lined one wall, while cider and stronger beverages were served at another. It's quite a gathering, Hannah observed as they entered. Harvest time's important around here. Good year means everyone can breathe easier through the winter. Wyatt guided her toward where Mrs. Abernathy was chatting with other townswomen. I'll fetch you some cider. That would be nice, thank you. As Wyatt moved away, Mrs. Abernathy beamed at Hannah. My dear, you look lovely. I was hoping you'd join us tonight. It seems the entire town is here, Hannah commented, accepting introductions to several women she hadn't yet met. That's the beauty of these gatherings, said a woman introduced as Mrs. Peterson. Brings everyone together, especially before winter sets in. Wyatt returned with 2 cups of cider, handing one to Hannah. The conversation flowed easily with talk of the harvest yields, plans for winter, and gentle gossip about town affairs. Hannah found herself relaxing slightly, drawn into the community's warm embrace despite her reservations. When the band struck up a waltz, Wyatt turned to her. Would you honor me with this dance, Miss Odell? Hannah hesitated. Dancing meant closeness, conversation away from others' ears. It felt like a risk. I'm afraid I'm rather out of practice. Fortunately, I'm an excellent lead, he replied with a gentle smile that held no pressure. But only if you wish to. Something about his patient respect made her relent. Very well, Mr. Young, one dance. His hand at her waist was respectful, maintaining proper distance as they joined other couples on the floor. Wyatt moved with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback. You mentioned you're from St. Louis originally? He asked as they circled the floor. Hannah nodded, deciding there was no harm in sharing basic facts. Yes, my father had a furniture business there. After he passed, I moved to Omaha before coming here. That's quite a journey for a lady on her own. The West is full of people seeking new beginnings, Mr. Young. I'm hardly unique in that regard. His eyes studied her face. No, but there's something about you that is unique. You carry yourself differently from most newcomers, like you're expecting the ground to fall away beneath your feet at any moment. Hannah missed a step, caught off guard by his perception. Wyatt smoothly corrected, continuing their dance without interruption. I apologize if that was too forward, he said quietly. You're very observant, she managed, comes with ranching. You learn to notice small details, changes in weather, animal behavior, people's intentions. His expression grew more serious. Someone hurt you badly, didn't they? Hannah stiffened in his arms. Mr. Young, you don't have to tell me, he interrupted gently. Just know that not everyone is looking to take advantage. Some of us are exactly what we appear to be. The music ended before she could respond. Hannah stepped back, flustered by how easily he seemed to read her. Thank you for the dance. If you'll excuse me, I need some air. She made her way to the small porch outside the town hall, drawing in deep breaths of the cool evening air. Wyatt Young was dangerously perceptive, and his genuine manner was beginning to make small cracks in the walls she'd so carefully built. Miss Odell, Martha Carson appeared beside her. Are you feeling unwell? Hannah composed herself. Just a little warm from dancing. It's a lovely event. Indeed it is. Martha smiled. I couldn't help noticing you and Wyatt Young. He's a good man, you know, lost his wife to fever 3 years back. Hasn't shown interest in any woman since until you arrived. Hannah wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected information. I'm not looking for, that is, I have no intention of. Martha patted her arm. Of course, dear, I'm just an old woman who believes everyone deserves happiness. Now shall we go back inside? The apple pies are about to be served, and Josephine Miller will never forgive me if I'm misjudging the contest. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly enough. Hannah managed to avoid being alone with Wyatt again, though she was conscious of his eyes following her occasionally. When she finally prepared to leave, he appeared at her side. May I walk you back to the hotel? It's gotten dark. Hannah glanced at the night sky, realizing how late it had become. That's not necessary. Perhaps not necessary, but it would be my pleasure. His expression was earnest. No ulterior motives, Miss Odell, just ensuring you arrive safely. The streets of Kearney were indeed dark, with only occasional lamplight from windows. Practical considerations won out. Very well, thank you. They walked in silence for a few moments before Wyatt spoke again. I hope you enjoyed the evening. I did, she admitted. The town has been welcoming. People recognize quality when they see it. Mrs. Abernathy can't stop singing your praises. Hannah felt a blush warm her cheeks, grateful for the darkness. I'm simply doing my job, and doing it exceptionally well from what I hear. They had reached the hotel's front steps. Wyatt turned to face her. Miss Odell, Hannah, if I may, I'd like to call on you properly sometime. Perhaps take you for a drive on Sunday afternoon. The request shouldn't have surprised her, yet Hannah found herself unprepared. Mr. Young, Wyatt, please. Wyatt, she conceded. I'm flattered, but I'm not in a position to. That is, I'm focused on establishing myself here. His eyes were kind in the faint light from the hotel window. I understand, but sometimes life offers unexpected paths. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle as he raised it briefly to his lips in an old-fashioned gesture. Good night, Hannah. Thank you for the dance. As Hannah watched him walk away, she felt an uncomfortable mixture of emotions. Attraction, certainly she couldn't deny that Wyatt Young was a handsome, compelling man. But fear predominated. She had trusted once before with devastating consequences. Opening herself to potential hurt again seemed foolish beyond measure. Yet as she prepared for bed that night, Hannah found herself thinking of the sincerity in his eyes, the respectful way he had accepted her refusal without pushing. Perhaps not all men were like Edward, but was she brave enough or foolish enough to find out? The following weeks brought an unexpected development to Kearney. News spread that the railroad company was considering extending a spur line to the town, which would dramatically improve connections to larger markets in Omaha and beyond. The possibility created a buzz of excitement and speculation throughout the community. For Hannah, the news brought mixed feelings. Improved rail access would benefit the general store tremendously, but the influx of new people and attention made her uneasy. More connections to Omaha increased the slight but terrifying possibility that news of Edward's schemes and her involvement as his supposed partner might follow her. Mrs. Abernathy noticed her distraction as they worked on a large order for winter supplies. "Everything all right, dear?" "You seem troubled." "Just thinking about the railroad news," Hannah replied, not entirely dishonest. "It will change things for the store. For the better, I should think. We'll be able to get goods faster, fresher, might even expand our inventory." The older woman peered at Hannah over her spectacles. Change can be frightening, but often brings unexpected blessings. Hannah suspected Mrs. Abernathy wasn't just talking about the railroad. Since the harvest dance 3 weeks earlier, Wyatt Young had made no further attempts to court her, respecting her wishes. He still greeted her warmly when their paths crossed in town, but maintained a polite distance that somehow made Hannah more aware of him than ever. "I suppose you're right," she conceded, returning her attention to the order forms. That afternoon, as Hannah was arranging a new shipment of winter boots, the store bell jangled. She looked up to see a well-dressed stranger enter a man in an expensive suit that marked him as an outsider in the frontier town. "Good afternoon," she greeted him. "Welcome to Abernathy's. How may I help you?" The man smiled, removing his hat. "Just browsing for now, thank you." "Fine establishment you have here." "Mrs. Abernathy takes great pride in her store," Hannah replied, continuing her work while keeping an eye on the visitor. Something about him triggered a vague sense of unease. He wandered the aisles, examining various items before approaching the counter where Hannah was now organizing receipts. "I understand the railroad might be coming to Kearney soon. Exciting times ahead." "So I've heard. Are you with the railroad company?" In a manner of speaking. "James Harrington." He extended his hand, which Hannah briefly shook. "I represent certain investment interests looking for opportunities in growing communities." The term investment interests sent a chill down Hannah's spine, too reminiscent of Edward's schemes. "I see, Mrs. Abernathy handles all business matters for the store. She should return shortly if you wish to speak with her." Mr. Harrington leaned against the counter, studying Hannah with an interest that made her uncomfortable. "Actually, I'm gathering information about the town in general." "You seem like an observant young woman. Have you been in Kearney long?" "A few months," she answered carefully, "and before that, you don't strike me as having been born to frontier life." Hannah straightened, her guard rising. "Mr. Harrington, I'm afraid I have work to complete." "Was there something specific you needed from the store?" He smiled, apparently unruffled by her deflection. "My apologies if I seemed intrusive. Professional habit, I'm afraid, always assessing opportunities." He selected a tin of hard candies from a display. "I'll take these." As Hannah wrapped his purchase, the store bell rang again. This time, Wyatt Young entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. His eyes quickly assessed the situation, something in Hannah's posture perhaps alerting him to her discomfort. "Afternoon, Hannah," he greeted, then nodded to the stranger. "Don't believe we've met. Wyatt Young, James Harrington." The men shook hands, sizing each other up in that particular way men do, just passing through looking at business prospects, railroad-related. Wyatt asked, his tone conversational but with an undercurrent Hannah couldn't quite identify. Among other interests, Harrington collected his purchase. "Miss Odell," Hannah supplied reluctantly. "Miss Odell has been most helpful. I'll be in town a few days, staying at the Carson Hotel." "Perhaps we'll speak again." With a tip of his hat, he departed. As soon as the door closed behind him, Wyatt turned to Hannah. "You all right? You looked uncomfortable." Hannah was surprised by his perception. "I'm fine, just something about him seemed familiar somehow." "Railroads bringing all sorts through town lately, not all of them with honest intentions." Wyatt's eyes were concerned. "If he bothers you again, let me know." The protective sentiment should have irritated her. Hannah had spent months proving she could manage on her own, but instead, she found it oddly comforting. "Thank you, but I'm sure it's nothing. Did you need something from the store?" "Actually, yes." He seemed to recall his purpose. "Mrs. Abernathy mentioned you received those leather-bound journals I ordered. They arrived yesterday. Hannah moved to retrieve a package from beneath the counter. She set them aside for you. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the parcel, the brief contact sending an unexpected warmth through her. Thank you. Wyatt seemed reluctant to leave. Hannah, I know you said you weren't interested in my calling on you, I've respected that. But I can't help feeling something's troubling you, especially with strangers like Harrington asking questions. Hannah hesitated, torn between her instinct for self-protection and a growing desire to trust this man who had shown nothing but respect and kindness. It's complicated. Most worthwhile things are, his voice softened. I'm riding out to check the north pasture tomorrow, pretty stretch of land along the river. If you wanted to get away from town for a few hours, I'd be honored to show you. Just a ride, nothing more. The invitation was tempting a chance to escape the confines of town, to breathe freely without constantly maintaining her guard. I don't know. Think about it, I'll be passing by around noon. He tipped his hat. Take care, Hannah. After he left, Hannah found herself seriously considering his offer. A ride away from Kearney might clear her head, help her decide what to do if James Harrington continued asking questions about her past. More concerning, his presence reminded her that she couldn't outrun her history forever. That evening, Hannah wrote a brief note to Mrs. Abernathy explaining she might be absent for a few hours the following day, then retired to bed with her thoughts in turmoil. By morning, she'd made her decision. At noon, Hannah waited outside the general store, wearing her simplest riding skirt and a warm jacket against the autumn chill. When Wyatt appeared leading 2 horses, his own chestnut stallion and a gentle-looking bay mare, a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation fluttered in her stomach. You decided to come, he observed with a pleased smile. I could use some fresh air, Hannah replied, trying to sound casual. The store gets stuffy this time of year with the stove going. Wyatt helped her mount the mare, his hands respectful at her waist. Daisy here is the gentlest horse on my ranch. She'll give you no trouble. They rode out of town at an easy pace, Hannah gradually relaxing as they left Kearney behind. The Nebraska countryside stretched around them, the prairie grasses turned golden in autumn's embrace. The sky arched endlessly overhead, a clear, perfect blue that seemed to wash away her worries. Beautiful, isn't it? Wyatt said as they crested a small rise. That's what drew me here after the war, all this space, this possibility. You fought in the war. Hannah asked, realizing how little she actually knew about him. Wyatt nodded, his expression momentarily distant. Union cavalry, came west afterward like a lot of men, needed open skies after seeing so much darkness. He glanced at her. Bought the ranch with my army pay and built it up over the years. And your wife, Hannah ventured, remembering what Martha had told her. A shadow crossed his face. Sarah, we married in 73. She died of fever in 75, was expecting our first child. I'm so sorry, Hannah said softly, understanding his loss in a way she couldn't have before experiencing her own. For a long time, I thought that part of my life was over. His eyes met hers. Until recently? Hannah looked away, uncomfortable with the implication. The land is beautiful, she said, deliberately changing the subject. You have a good eye for it. Wyatt accepted the deflection with grace. Ranch is about 5 miles that way, he pointed northwest. The river bend I wanted to show you is just ahead. They rode in comfortable silence until they reached a spot where the small river curved gracefully, creating a peaceful haven of cottonwood trees and willows. Wyatt dismounted first, then helped Hannah down. We can rest the horses here a while, he suggested, securing their reins to a low branch. There's a good view from those rocks. Hannah followed him to a natural outcropping overlooking the river. The water sparkled in the afternoon sun and birds called from the trees. It was utterly peaceful, far from the complications of town. Thank you for bringing me here, she said as they sat on the sun-warmed stone. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Wyatt studied her profile. Something's been weighing on you lately, more than usual. Hannah considered deflecting again, but found herself unexpectedly wanting to confide in him. That man in the store yesterday, Mr. Harrington, he reminded me of someone from Omaha, someone who, she hesitated, then decided on a partial truth, Someone who betrayed my trust. Ah. Wyatt nodded slowly. That explains a few things, does it? You keep everyone at a distance, especially men. His eyes were gentle. Someone hurt you badly and now you're afraid to trust again. Hannah looked down at her hands. It's not just about hurt feelings. I invested everything I had in a business venture with a man I thought I could trust. He disappeared with my money and that of several others. I came to Kearney with nothing but what I could carry. Wyatt absorbed this. That's why you're so determined to be independent. I can't afford to make the same mistake twice. She met his gaze directly. I won't be so foolish again. Trusting someone isn't foolish, Hannah, necessary even, especially out here. He gestured to the vast landscape around them. No one survives the frontier alone, perhaps. But I've learned to be cautious about where I place my trust. Wyatt was quiet for a moment. This man who betrayed you cared for him? Hannah flushed slightly. I thought I did. I believed his promises of partnership, of building something together. It seems ridiculous now how easily I was deceived. It's not ridiculous to believe in someone. Wyatt's voice was low. The fault lies with him, not you. A lump formed in Hannah's throat at his simple understanding. Thank you for saying that. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the river flow. Finally, Wyatt spoke again. Hannah, I want you to know something. He turned to face her fully. I won't take advantage of your heart. Whatever happens between us, friendship or possibly more, I'll never betray your trust. That's a promise. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. For the first time in months, Hannah felt something like hope stir within her. I want to believe that. Don't believe it yet, he said with surprising gentleness. Let me prove it day by day. The ride back to town was easier somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. They spoke of lighter things, town gossip, books they'd read, memories of places they'd seen. Hannah found herself laughing at Wyatt's stories of ranch mishaps, the sound strange to her own ears after so many months of guarded restraint. As they approached Kearney, however, her mood sobered. The sight of the Carson Hotel reminded her of James Harrington and his probing questions. Wyatt noticed her change in demeanor. What is it? Just thinking about Mr. Harrington. His questions about my past made me uncomfortable. Want me to have a word with him? Make sure he understands the concept of privacy? Hannah shook her head. No, but thank you. That might only make him more curious. I'll simply avoid him until he leaves town. Wyatt helped her dismount outside the general store. I enjoyed our ride today, he said, keeping hold of her hand a moment longer than necessary. So did I, Hannah admitted. Thank you. Perhaps we could do it again sometime. Hannah smiled, surprising herself with how naturally it came. I'd like that. As she watched him lead the horses away, Hannah realized that for the first time since arriving in Kearney, she was looking forward to something beyond mere survival. The next morning, however, her newfound optimism was shattered. Hannah arrived at the general store to find Mrs. Abernathy in an agitated state, clutching a newspaper that had arrived on the morning stage. Hannah, dear, there's something here you should see. The older woman's expression was troubled as she handed over the Omaha Herald. Hannah's blood ran cold as she saw the headline. Notorious confidence man Blackwell captured. Edward's photograph stared back at her, alongside a detailed account of his schemes, including mention of his female accomplice who remains at large. Though Hannah had been a victim, not an accomplice, the article painted a different picture. According to the reporter, Edward had claimed she was a willing partner who had fled with her share of the money. It was a lie, of course, a final betrayal, but who would believe her over him? Is this the man? Mrs. Abernathy asked gently. The one who took your money. Hannah nodded, unable to speak past the constriction in her throat. I thought as much when I read it. That Harrington fellow was asking about you at the social last night, whether you'd come from Omaha if you'd arrived with money. The older woman placed a comforting hand on Hannah's arm. I told him you were a good girl who works hard and keeps to herself. Thank you, Hannah whispered, fear gripping her heart. If Harrington connected her to Edward's case, her reputation in Kearney would be destroyed. She might even face legal questions despite her innocence. What will you do? Mrs. Abernathy asked. Hannah took a steadying breath. Continue working for now. Perhaps this will all blow over. But by midday, it was clear the situation was worsening. Several customers gave Hannah curious looks, and she overheard whispers as they left. Harrington had been busy spreading suspicions throughout town. The final blow came when Sheriff Miller entered the store, his expression grave. "Miss Odell, I need a word with you, privately if possible." Mrs. Abernathy immediately came to her defense. "Whatever you need to say to Hannah can be said right here, Thomas Miller. I won't have you treating her like some common criminal." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "There have been allegations, Mrs. Abernathy. I'm just doing my duty by looking into them." Allegations from a stranger passing through when we all know Hannah's character. The older woman was formidable in her indignation. Hannah touched her employer's arm. "It's all right, I have nothing to hide." She turned to the sheriff. "I was a victim of Edward Blackwell's schemes, not his accomplice. He took my inheritance every cent along with money from several others in Omaha. I came to Kearney to start fresh." Sheriff Miller studied her face. "That matches what Wyatt Young said when he stopped by my office earlier. Said you'd mentioned something about a man who betrayed your trust." Hannah's surprise must have shown on her face. "Wyatt's got good instincts about people," the sheriff continued, "and I trust his judgment. Still, with rumors flying and that newspaper article, what can I do to clear my name?" Hannah asked. "Might help to have confirmation from authorities in Omaha. I could telegraph the marshal there." Hannah nodded, relief mingling with anxiety. "Please do. They'll confirm I filed a complaint against Blackwell before leaving the city." The sheriff seemed satisfied with this. "That should settle matters then. In the meantime, try not to worry too much. Folks here know you better than some city newspaper." After he left, Hannah sank onto a nearby stool, suddenly exhausted. "I never thought it would follow me here," she murmured. Mrs. Abernathy patted her shoulder. "Troubles have a way of catching up, dear, but facing them is better than running forever." "I wasn't running," Hannah protested weakly. "I just wanted a new beginning." "And you'll have it," the older woman assured her, "once this misunderstanding is cleared up." The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety. Hannah felt the weight of curious stares and hushed conversations whenever customers entered the store. By closing time, she was emotionally drained. "Why don't you go back to the hotel?" Mrs. Abernathy suggested. "I can finish up here." "Get some rest, things will look better tomorrow." Hannah nodded gratefully and gathered her shawl. The autumn evening was chill as she stepped onto the boardwalk, her thoughts too preoccupied to notice the approaching figure until he spoke. "Miss Odell." James Harrington blocked her path, his smile cold and calculating. "Or should I say Miss Blackwell's partner?" Hannah stiffened. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrington, I need to pass." "Of course. Just wanted to let you know I've telegraphed some associates in Omaha. There's a substantial reward for information leading to the recovery of the stolen funds." His eyes glittered. "I wonder what your share was worth abandoning your respectable life." "I was a victim, not an accomplice," Hannah stated firmly, though her heart raced with fear. "The marshal in Omaha has my sworn statement. A convenient claim. We'll see what the authorities believe when they arrive." He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Good evening, Miss Odell." Hannah hurried toward the hotel, fighting tears of frustration. Everything she'd worked for in Kearney was threatened by Edward's lies and this stranger's greed. The unfairness of it burned like a physical pain. She was so distressed that she didn't notice Wyatt until he fell into step beside her. "Hannah, what happened?" The concern in his voice nearly undid her composure. "Mr. Harrington," she managed, "he believes I was Edward's accomplice, says he's contacted people in Omaha." Wyatt's expression hardened. "I heard rumors were spreading, that's why I spoke to Sheriff Miller." "Thank you for that," she said quietly. "Let me walk you to the hotel." They continued in silence until they reached the hotel porch. Hannah paused, not wanting to face the curious stares inside just yet. "Everything I've built here is in jeopardy because of Edward's lies." "The truth will come out," Wyatt assured her. "Sheriff Miller telegraphed Omaha this afternoon, should have an answer by tomorrow. And if it's not enough, if people choose to believe the worst." Hannah's voice trembled despite her efforts to remain calm. Wyatt's eyes held hers steadily. "Then we'll face it together." The simple declaration, the "we" rather than "you," touched Hannah deeply. "Why would you stand by me when others are so quick to judge?" "Because I see who you really are, Hannah Odell." He reached for her hand, holding it gently between both of his. A woman of courage and integrity who deserves far better than she's received. Hannah looked down at their joined hands. I'm afraid, she admitted in a whisper. I know, but you're not alone anymore. Wyatt's voice was soft but certain. I won't take advantage of your heart, Hannah. But I will defend it with everything I have. The tenderness in his expression broke through the last of her defenses. Tears she'd held back for months finally spilled over. I don't know if I can trust again, she confessed. I want to, but… Then we'll start small, Wyatt suggested, gently wiping away a tear with his thumb. Trust me to walk you safely to your door. Trust me to speak the truth when others spread lies. The rest will come in time. Hannah managed a tremulous smile. I think I can do that. Inside the hotel, Martha Carson greeted them with a sympathetic look. Heard about the trouble, Hannah. Don't you worry, we know what kind of person you are. Thank you, Martha. Hannah was touched by the show of support. Got a telegram for you, too. Martha handed her a yellow envelope. Came while you were working. Hannah opened it with shaking fingers, Wyatt a reassuring presence beside her. The message was brief but clear. Miss Odell filed complaint against Blackwell. Stop victim, not accomplice. Stop full statement follows by post-stop Marshal Jenkins. Omaha relief washed through her. The marshal confirms I was a victim, she told Wyatt, showing him the telegram. That should put an end to Harrington's allegations, Wyatt said with satisfaction. Sheriff Miller will make sure everyone knows the truth. For the first time since seeing the newspaper, Hannah felt she could breathe freely again. I can't believe it's over so quickly. Justice occasionally works as it should, Wyatt observed with a slight smile. Will you be all right now? Hannah nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the hotel lobby. Yes, thank you for everything. Meet me for breakfast tomorrow. We can talk about what happens next. The invitation held possibilities that both frightened and excited her. I'd like that. After Wyatt left, Hannah climbed the stairs to her room, feeling lighter despite the emotional exhaustion of the day. The crisis had forced her to confront her past rather than run from it, and in doing so, had revealed who truly stood by her side. Perhaps, she thought as she prepared for bed, Wyatt was right. Trust could begin with small steps, and maybe, just maybe, her heart wasn't beyond healing after all. Morning brought clear skies and a crisp autumn breeze. Hannah dressed with particular care, selecting a blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. When she entered the hotel dining room, she saw Wyatt already waiting, rising to his feet as she approached. You look lovely, he said simply, pulling out her chair. Thank you. Hannah felt a blush warm her cheeks at the admiration in his gaze. Any word on Mr. Harrington this morning? Left on the early stage, Wyatt reported with satisfaction. Sheriff Miller had a conversation with him last night after receiving the marshal's telegram, suggested his presence in Kearney was no longer required. Relief flooded through Hannah. I can hardly believe it's resolved so quickly. Small towns have their advantages. Word spreads fast, both the bad and the good. Wyatt waited while Martha served them coffee and biscuits. I spoke with Mrs. Abernathy. She asked me to tell you to take the morning off, said you deserved some rest after yesterday. That's kind of her, but I should work. Prove to everyone that nothing's changed. Nothing has changed, Wyatt agreed. You're still the same woman who's earned this town's respect these past months, but perhaps you could use a few hours for yourself. Hannah considered this. What did you have in mind? I thought we might visit my ranch. I promised to show you around properly someday. His eyes held a question. It's a fine day for a ride. The invitation represented more than just a social outing. It was Wyatt opening his world to her, inviting her to see the life he'd built. I'd like that, Hannah decided. They set out after breakfast, riding side by side along the trail that led northwest from town. The air was crisp and clear, the autumn sun warming their shoulders. Hannah felt an unfamiliar sense of anticipation, a lightness that had been absent for too long. Tell me more about your ranch, she prompted as they rode. Wyatt's face brightened with pride. Started with just 50 acres and a dozen cattle. Now it's over 500 acres with a respectable herd. Built the main house myself, added to it over the years. That's impressive, Hannah said, genuinely admiring his accomplishment. Had plenty of setbacks along the way, drought years, harsh winters, but the land always comes back if you treat it right. He glanced at her. Same might be said for people. Hannah considered his words, perhaps. Though some wounds take longer to heal than others. True enough. He pointed ahead where the trail curved around a stand of trees. Almost there, you'll see the house first, then the barns beyond. As they crested a gentle rise, the Double Y Ranch came into view. Hannah's breath caught at the picturesque scene, a substantial two-story house of weathered wood and stone, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings and corrals. Smoke curled from the chimney, and several horses grazed in a nearby pasture. "Wyatt, it's beautiful," she said sincerely. His pleased expression warmed something inside her. "Come on, I'll show you around." They dismounted in the yard, where a middle-aged man emerged from one of the barns to greet them. "Morning, boss. Didn't expect you back so soon." "Change of plans, Frank. This is Miss Hannah Odell from town." "Hannah, this is Frank Dawson, my foreman." Frank tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam, heard good things about you from Mrs. Abernathy." "Thank you," Hannah replied, touched that her reputation had reached even here. "Everything all right with the north pasture fence?" Wyatt asked. "All fixed." "Boys are moving the cattle back there now." Frank took the reins of their horses. "I'll see to these if you want to show Miss Odell around." Wyatt led Hannah toward the house, a sturdy structure with a welcoming porch across the front. "It's not fancy," he said, almost apologetically, "but it's solid, built to last." Inside, Hannah found herself in a comfortable living area with simple but well-crafted furniture. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while windows allowed natural light to fill the space. It felt lived in and masculine, yet somehow inviting. "Did you make these?" she asked, running her hand over a polished oak table. Wyatt nodded. "Woodworking helps pass the winter evenings. Sarah always said I needed something to keep my hands busy." The mention of his late wife hung briefly in the air between them. "She would be proud of what you've built here," Hannah said gently. "I think so." Wyatt's expression was thoughtful. "Took me a long time to speak of her without pain. Now I can remember the good without drowning in what was lost." Hannah envied his healing. "Does it ever fade completely? The hurt of betrayal?" "Not completely, but it changes, becomes part of you rather than something that defines you." His eyes met hers. "You'll get there, Hannah, in your own time." They continued the tour through the kitchen with its large wood stove and well-stocked pantry, then upstairs to see the bedrooms. The master bedroom was simply furnished but comfortable, with a handmade quilt covering the large bed. "My mother made that before she passed," Wyatt explained, seeing Hannah's admiration of the intricate pattern. "Taught Sarah how to quilt too, though she never finished one of her own." Throughout the house, Hannah noticed small touches that spoke of a man who cared about his home. Books arranged on shelves, a comfortable reading chair positioned to catch the afternoon light, photographs in simple frames. It was a stark contrast to Edward's temporary apartments filled with expensive but impersonal furnishings. Back downstairs, Wyatt prepared coffee on the kitchen stove while Hannah explored the adjoining study where ledgers and ranch records were neatly organized. "You keep meticulous accounts," she observed, impressed by his systematic approach. "Have to in ranching. One bad year can ruin you if you're not careful with your resources." He brought 2 steaming cups to the small table by the window. "Sarah used to handle the books. After she died, I had to learn. Never had much schooling, but numbers make sense to me." They sat together, watching through the window as ranch hands moved about the yard, going about their daily tasks. The domesticity of the moment struck Hannah how natural it felt to be here with him, sharing coffee in his kitchen. "What are you thinking?" Wyatt asked, studying her expression. Hannah hesitated, then decided on honesty. "That this is a good place, a real home." "It is," he agreed. "Though sometimes it feels too quiet." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Hannah looked down at her coffee. "Wyatt, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I didn't bring you here to pressure you, just wanted you to see this part of my life." "I'm glad you did." She met his eyes. "After Edward, I convinced myself I'd be better off alone, safer. But seeing what you've built, it makes me wonder if I've been denying myself something important out of fear." Wyatt reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Fear is natural after what you experienced, but it doesn't have to be permanent. Hannah turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining. The simple connection sent warmth spreading through her. How do you know when it's safe to trust again? You don't, not with absolute certainty. His thumb traced gentle patterns on her skin. At some point, you have to decide if the possibility of joy is worth the risk of pain. His honesty touched her deeply. No false promises, no pressure, just a truth she needed to hear. Thank you for being patient with me. Some things are worth waiting for, Wyatt said simply. The remainder of their visit passed comfortably as Wyatt showed her the barns, introduced her to more of his ranch hands, and explained the operation of the ranch. Hannah found herself genuinely interested, asking questions and absorbing the details of this life so different from her own experiences. As the afternoon waned and they prepared to return to town, Hannah felt reluctant to leave the peaceful sanctuary of the Double Y. Here, away from town gossip and painful reminders, she had glimpsed a different future than the solitary one she'd resigned herself to. "I've enjoyed today," she told Wyatt as they mounted their horses for the return journey. His smile was warm. "So have I. Perhaps you could visit again soon." "I'd like that." The words came easily now, her earlier reservations softened by the day they'd shared. The ride back to Kearney was comfortable, their conversation flowing naturally from ranch matters to books they'd read to childhood memories. By the time they reached the edge of town, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in dramatic hues of orange and pink. "Beautiful," Hannah murmured, reining in her horse to admire the view. "It is," Wyatt agreed, though when she glanced at him, he was looking at her rather than the sunset. The intensity in his gaze stirred something deep within her, a longing she'd denied for too long. Before she could overthink, Hannah leaned toward him, closing the distance between their horses. Wyatt recognized her intention, meeting her halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and answer exchanged without words. His hand came up to cradle her cheek, and Hannah leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as the sweetness of the moment washed over her. When they parted, Wyatt's expression was tender but serious. "I meant what I said, Hannah. I won't take advantage of your heart. If you need more time, I do," she admitted. "But I also need you. I'm tired of living half a life because of what Edward did." Wyatt's smile was understanding. "Then we'll take it one day at a time." As they rode into town, Hannah felt a sense of possibility that had been absent for too long. The future was uncertain, it always would be, but for the first time since Edward's betrayal, she was willing to embrace that uncertainty rather than hide from it. The following weeks brought gradual but significant changes to Hannah's life in Kearney. The scandal of the newspaper article faded as quickly as it had arisen, thanks to the marshal's confirmation of her innocence and the town's willingness to judge her by her actions rather than distant rumors. Her relationship with Wyatt developed slowly but steadily. He called on her properly several evenings a week, sometimes taking her for walks along the river, other times simply sitting with her on the hotel porch, talking as the stars emerged overhead. On Sundays, she often accompanied him to church services, afterward joining him for dinner at the ranch or picnics when the weather permitted. Each interaction strengthened Hannah's confidence in his character. Wyatt was unfailingly honest, respectful of her boundaries, and genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. When she shared more details of Edward's deception, he listened without judgment, his anger directed at the man who had hurt her rather than at her for having trusted unwisely. Mrs. Abernathy observed their courtship with approving eyes. "He's a good man, that Wyatt Young," she commented one afternoon as they worked together in the store. "Never thought he'd look at another woman after Sarah passed." "He loved her very much," Hannah said, having heard more about Wyatt's first marriage as he gradually opened up to her. "Indeed he did, but that heart of his is big enough for new love." The older woman gave Hannah a knowing look. "And I suspect yours might be too, despite your past hurts." Hannah couldn't deny it. The protective walls she'd built around her heart were slowly but surely coming down, brick by brick, with each moment spent in Wyatt's company. As October gave way to November, preparations for winter began in earnest throughout Kearney. The store was busier than ever as farmers and townspeople secured supplies before the harsh Nebraska winter set in. Hannah worked long hours, but found joy in the community's rhythms and her growing place within it. One crisp Saturday morning, Wyatt arrived at the store earlier than usual, his expression bright with excitement. "Can you get away for a few hours? There's something I want to show you." Mrs. Abernathy immediately waved her off. "Go on, we're slow this morning anyway." Curious, Hannah fetched her coat and followed Wyatt outside where his wagon waited. "What's this about? You'll see," was all he would say as he helped her up to the seat. They drove north out of town, following the river road. Hannah noticed they were heading in the direction of his ranch, but turned onto a smaller trail before reaching the main property. After about a mile, they came to a clearing overlooking the river, the same beautiful spot he had shown her weeks earlier. Only now, something was different. A small cabin stood near the edge of the clearing, smoke curling from its chimney. "What is this?" Hannah asked as Wyatt halted the wagon. "Come see." He helped her down, taking her hand as he led her toward the cabin. It was a simple structure, newly built with logs that still held the golden hue of fresh-cut timber. A covered porch faced the river, and neatly framed windows reflected the morning light. "Did you build this?" Hannah asked, amazed by the craftsmanship. Wyatt nodded, a hint of nervousness in his expression. "Been working on it whenever I could get away. Frank and the boys helped with the heavy lifting. But why? It's not exactly hunting season. It's not a hunting cabin." He guided her up the steps and opened the door. "It's for you." "If you want it." The interior took Hannah's breath away. Though small, the cabin was beautifully arranged with a main room combining kitchen and living areas, and what appeared to be a bedroom through a doorway at the back. A stone fireplace provided warmth, and someone had arranged wildflowers in a pottery vase on the table. Most striking were the bookshelves built into one wall, already filled with volumes. Hannah approached them in wonder. "These are my favorites, how did you know?" "Been paying attention when you talk about books you love." Wyatt watched her reaction carefully. "There's something else, too." He led her to a small desk positioned near one of the windows where a leather-bound journal lay open, a pen beside it. "You mentioned once that you used to write before." "Before everything happened with Edward, that you missed it." Hannah touched the journal reverently. I do." Wyatt took her hands in his expression earnest. "Hannah, I know you've been hurt, know you're still healing. But I love you have almost from the moment I first saw you stepping off that boardwalk into my path." Her heart seemed to stop at his declaration. "I'm not asking you to decide everything today," he continued. "This place, it can be yours alone if that's what you need. A place to write, to think, to heal completely, or," he hesitated, "it could be the beginning of something more when you're ready." Tears filled Hannah's eyes as she understood the depth of his gift, not just a cabin, but the freedom to choose her own path forward. "Wyatt." "I won't take advantage of your heart, Hannah," he promised softly. "Whatever you decide, however long it takes." The tenderness in his voice undid her completely. Hannah reached up to touch his face, her fingertips tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both frightening and perfectly right. "I think I have for weeks, but was too afraid to admit it." Joy transformed Wyatt's expression. "You're sure?" In answer, Hannah rose on tiptoe and kissed him, pouring all her newfound certainty into the connection. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened into something that spoke of shared futures and promises kept. When they finally parted, both breathless, Hannah rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I don't need more time," she said. "Or rather, I don't want to waste any more of it being afraid." Wyatt's smile was radiant. "Does that mean?" "It means yes," Hannah said firmly. "To everything." The winter of 1878-79 was remembered in Kearney as particularly harsh, with heavy snowfalls and bitter temperatures that tested even the most prepared homesteads. For Hannah, however, it was a season of unexpected joy. She and Wyatt were married 2 weeks after his proposal, in a simple ceremony at the church with the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Abernathy insisted on hosting the reception at the store, which was transformed for the occasion with evergreen boughs and ribbon decorations. "Never seen a happier bride," Martha Carson commented as Hannah and Wyatt shared their first dance. Or a man more besotted with his wife. It was true. Despite her earlier fears, Hannah had embraced this new chapter with a full heart. Wyatt's steady love and unwavering respect had healed wounds she'd thought would never mend. Each day brought new discoveries about him, about herself, about the life they were building together. They divided their time between the main ranch house and the river cabin, which became Hannah's special retreat for writing and reflection. As snow blanketed the landscape, they settled into the rhythms of married life, finding joy in both quiet evenings by the fire and the daily work of the ranch. Hannah discovered an aptitude for ranch management, her bookkeeping skills proving valuable as she organized the business side of the Double Y. Wyatt respected her intelligence and sought her opinion on important decisions, creating a true partnership that fulfilled promises Edward had only pretended to offer. By spring, the ranch was thriving under their combined efforts. The railroad spur line to Kearney was completed in March 1879, bringing new opportunities for cattle shipping that increased the ranch's profitability. Hannah maintained her friendship with Mrs. Abernathy, helping at the store occasionally when extra hands were needed. As the land renewed itself with spring blossoms and fresh green grass, Hannah found herself facing an unexpected but welcome development. The morning sickness confirmed what she had begun to suspect their family would be growing by winter. When she shared the news with Wyatt, his joy was boundless. He lifted her in a gentle embrace, his eyes shining with tears. "A baby," he whispered in wonder, placing his hand reverently over her still flat stomach. "Our child. Are you happy?" Hannah asked, though his expression left little doubt. "Happier than I ever thought possible." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for trusting me with your heart, Hannah Young. I promise to cherish it always." Their son was born on a cold December night in 1879 with Martha Carson and the town doctor in attendance. They named him James Samuel Young James after Hannah's father, and Samuel after Wyatt's. With his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, he was the perfect blend of them both. As Hannah held her newborn son in the home, she shared with a man who had kept every promise. She marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just over a year. The woman who had arrived in Kearney broken and distrustful was now whole again, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having suffered, and infinitely more grateful for the love she had found. "What are you thinking?" Wyatt asked, sitting beside her on the bed, his arm protectively around her shoulders as they both gazed at their sleeping child. Hannah smiled, leaning into his embrace. "That sometimes the things we fear most lead us to the places we most need to be." Wyatt pressed a kiss to her temple. "And are you where you need to be, Mrs. Young?" "Yes," Hannah answered without hesitation, her heart full to overflowing. "Exactly where I belong." The years that followed brought both challenges and blessings to the Young family. The Double Y Ranch expanded as Wyatt acquired neighboring properties, becoming one of the most successful cattle operations in the region. Hannah's journal writings evolved into stories that found their way into magazines and eventually a novel based on frontier life. James was joined by a sister, Sarah Elizabeth, in 1882 and another brother, Thomas Daniel, in 1884. The children grew strong and healthy, raised in a home filled with love and the values their parents cherished: honesty, hard work, and unwavering trust in each other. Kearney itself grew from a frontier town to a bustling small city, the railroad bringing prosperity and new settlers. Hannah maintained her friendship with Mrs. Abernathy until the older woman's passing in 1885, at which point she helped the woman's nephew transition into running the store that had given her first sanctuary. Occasionally, news would reach them of Edward Blackwell. He served 5 years in prison for his crimes, then disappeared from public record. Hannah found that thoughts of him no longer carried pain, just a distant recognition of how differently her life might have unfolded had she not found the courage to start anew. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wyatt surprised Hannah with an expansion to the river cabin, a larger writing space with windows overlooking the water, where she could pursue her increasingly successful literary career while remaining close to the family she adored. you ever regret it?" He asked as they stood on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the river gold. "Taking a chance on a dusty cowboy when you were determined to trust no one," Hannah turned in his arms, studying the beloved face that had grown only more dear over their years together. Lines of laughter framed his eyes now, and silver threaded through the hair at his temples, but he was still her Wyatt, steady, honest, and true. "Never," she answered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Best risk I ever took," Wyatt smiled against her lips. "I told you I wouldn't take advantage of your heart, and you never have," Hannah agreed, thinking of all they had built together from the broken pieces of her past. "You helped me rebuild it instead." As twilight deepened around them, they walked hand in hand back to the main house where their children waited, the living embodiments of a love that had overcome fear, of trust that had been justified 1,000 times over. For Hannah Odell Young, the journey from that first fearful arrival in Kearney had led to a destination beyond her wildest hopes, a life rich with purpose, joy, and the certainty that some hearts once given are treasured forever.